Hey folks, welcome. We're going to be looking at some functions in SQL Server. These are what are known as aggregate functions. That means that usually they'll be performing something on several records. And we're going to be looking at the min function, the max function, and the average function. And they basically do what they sound like. Before we get started, let me just show you what this table looks like. And while we're pulling up these records, if you like this video, please hit the like button. If you love it, you may want to subscribe. No pressure. Subscribe now. Here's how. Haha. Okay, so we've got employee. It's basically an employee table. We've got the employee name, we've got their department, we've got their salary. Okay, it's really typical. You notice there's a big gap between here and here. That's intentional because I'm trying to line up a whole bunch of other queries that are below here, and you'll see why I did that soon. Okay, what I'm going to do real quick is I'm just going to show you how each of these work. Now, if I do a max on salary, it's going to look in this whole table, and it's going to find the biggest salary, which I think is this one here, 898,000. And then min will look in the whole table and find the minimum salary, and then average will take the average salary. Now, I could filter this with a where clause, but I haven't done that. So let's just run all three of these and see what happens. Okay, so the highest is 898,000. That's somebody in the sales department, of course. The lowest is 18,000. That's probably like the mailroom or advertising or something. And then the average is 171,000. And notice, and this is just like in the real world, the average isn't necessarily halfway between the max and the min. It's actually a lot closer to the min, oddly enough. Because this number is really like an outlier, but that doesn't matter. It's all made up information. One of the things you notice is that the average has this weird, irrationally long number. So we're going to look a little bit later on how to clean that up, although that's not what the video is about. We're actually going to look at it right now. What I'm going to do here is run the average query that I just ran. I'm going to run it twice, one by itself, the way it was before, and then one with a little bit of formatting. See how this has the long, .36842. This just has .37. All I did is I used a cast, and then I said cast it as decimal 10-2. And the second parameter, this 2, means just go 2 places past the decimal point. Okay, so that's that. Now, let's move on to bigger and better things. We're going to be doing group by, but before we do, let me show you what happens if you try to run an aggregate function along with just other fields. SQL is going to freak out. This is not a problem in SQL Server or SQL in general. It's just you can't do this. It's going to throw an error, okay, by definition. It says the column emp, meaning it takes the first one. You know, this would have caused the error if it was first, and that would have caused the error if that was first. But it says the first column is invalid in the select list. In other words, it's invalid here because it is not contained in either an aggregate function, like max, or in a group by clause. Well, there's no group by clause because if there was, it would come after the from. It would be over here, and there isn't. Here's what it's talking about. Let's do a max salary, but now instead of the whole table, I'm going to pick department, but remember it failed up here. But it won't fail here because I have a group by, and I'm saying group by department. So what this is going to do, instead of showing me every record in the table, it's going to show me one record per department, and it's going to be the max salary. So there, advertising, the biggest is 32,000. The moral of that story is, don't get into advertising. Cafeteria, somebody makes more. Shows you priorities, right? Sales, somebody makes almost $1 million. Software, somebody makes $250,000. You want to be a software guy, not a sales guy, though. Trust me on that. Now, if I do the min on every department, same thing, except it's a lot more depressing. $18,000, $23,000, yuck. But still, the software guy, $134,000. If that's the minimum, that's a really good company to work at. Now, here's the average for the department, okay? Let's take a look at that. Shows every department. And it's putting all these zeros because I didn't format it. I just wanted to show that, but that's not really what this is about. Now, if you notice, the software guys still do good. They average 219,000. Nothing wrong with that. Over time, that will make you wealthy. Okay. Now, let me show you how to do all of these together. First of all, if I just do this, we're going to get the same error that we got before, but we're going to get it 3 times. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do this, but we have to have the from, and then we have to have a group by. We don't have to have an order by, but I just feel like putting that there. So I'm going to run this. So now what it's doing is it's saying, you know, for advertising, this is the max, this is the min, that's the average. It doesn't have to be halfway in between these, but because it's the different departments, it's probably going to be closer to the, you know, it's going to be probably closer to the middle. You know, so we've got the max, the min, the average, and you kind of get it all the way down. And yeah, you probably would want to format the average so it doesn't have that big long number. No big deal, but you already saw how to do that. Okay, let's get into the good stuff now, because right now on an interview, they will probably ask you about doing a group by. That usually comes up. But one thing I know they'll ask you about is doing stuff with partition by, analytical functions. Now, I'm going to show you, I'm going to do this 2 ways. These are aggregate functions still, but see the word over? If you haven't seen that before, okay, this is going to be like a new level of understanding in SQL. Analytical functions are these functions that enable you to do a lot of functionality with very little coding. All the hard work is being done inside of SQL. Now, you notice that the only difference between these 2 chunks of code, meaning this chunk and this chunk, is that the second chunk has this order by thing. Let me just put these spaces here so you can see like how it's missing up top. See, what's happening is I'm saying do a max salary, right? And a min salary and an average salary over, and then it says order by emp. So what it's going to do is, similar to a running total, it's going to show a running max, a running min, and a running average. What does that mean? Well, let me show you. Now, this is without partition by. This is going to show everybody in the company, and it's going to start with the first salary. Now, since there's only one salary in the first record, whatever that salary is set to, the max is going to be that, the min is going to be that, and the average is going to be that. But now when we get to the second one, 29,000, now these aggregate functions, because we're doing an analytical query, it's going to look at everything that came before, and it's going to say, well, what's the max? Well, it's still 134. But what's the min? Well, now the min is 29, because that's the lowest in this group. And then it's going to say, what's the average? So it's basically the average of these 2 things, or really these 2 things, which happens to be these 2 things, and it's that. But now, when we get to the third record, this 234,000, is that bigger than these? Yeah, so it's the new max. But we still have the same new minimum. And we have a new average, of course. Now, as we come down and come down and come down, we get to this record for Billy Ronzilli. He makes 19,000. That is the new minimum on the running minimum. So now it's 19 until we get to something even more depressing. You notice the average changes every time because we're always throwing something new in the mix. So basically, that's how this runs with a running max, a running min, and a running average. And you might think, okay, that's neat. Now you know how to do it. You can handle that on an interview. It may not come up that much in real life, but don't forget there's other analytical functions like lag and lead and rank and dense rank and row number that work the same way. They have different functionality, but the SQL coding is the right way. But here, I can tell you right away, if you do this and hand it in and show it to your boss, he's like, oh, I guess that's handy. But he's like, you know what would be really handy if we did it by department. Because doing it for the whole company, how does that really help us? No, it's not that helpful. But if you want to do it by the department, see, that's what this whole part is about. When it says partition by department, see, now Now, the difference between what you see here and what you're about to see is like night and day. So let's hit that. Okay. So now, what do we have? We have this. Notice all the advertising records are together at the top. They're sort of like grouped together, but that's a really bad way to explain it. Now let's do this. Similar to before, the first record is going to automatically have itself as the max, the min, and the average. But when we get to the next two, so now it's 18,000 and 32,000, well, 32 is clearly the max and 18 is the min. And when you average these, you can do this in your head. It's 50,000 divided by 2, we got 25,000. And then we come all the way down, we come all the way down here, and you notice there's two of them at 32,000, so 32,000 is still the max, 18,000 is still the mid, here's the average, thank you very much. But when we get to cafeteria, everything starts over. See, it starts at 31,000, 32 isn't the max anymore. The everything is based off 31,000. That's the max, that's the min, and that's the average because it's the first record in this partitioned department. And when we get to the second row, well, now 23 is less than 31, so 31 is still the max, but 23 is the new min, and of course 27 is the average. And then we get all the way down here where 46,000 is the max and 23 is blah, blah, blah. And you get it. So anyway, but then when we get to HR, they make a little more money. Everything resets. So you can understand why they call it analytical functions. You're analyzing stuff in a different way, and the code's not that difficult. Do you have any idea how much code it would take to replace any one of these lines? You'd have to put temp tables and loops and do all this ridiculous stuff and have variables and compare things. It would just take forever. But it's just one chunk in a select statement. It's a smartly organized one, but it does a lot of stuff for you. And so it's an analytical function. But why do they also call them window functions? Well, I would maintain it's not really a window function in any practical sense until you use partition by. Why? Well, what's a window? To a little kid who's drawing a picture of a building is a big rectangular shape that they try to make a rectangle, but they're kids and it's probably a trapezoid or a frustum. But anyway, and then what they do is they put windows on. Now, unless the kid lives in a contemporary home or something a little more designed, it's going to be a square building and square windows, pretty much, or rectangular. Well, that's what we have here. This whole record set is a big window, or it's a big building. But this is a window. This is a window. This is another window. This is another window. And this is another window. So think about it like this. That's why they're called window functions. Pretty cool, right? All right, folks, I've taken enough of your time. I hope this was instructive. Here's what you want to do. Play around with these. Look at several code examples. Write them out by hand. Don't just copy them. Write them out by hand. You might have to change between different editors because some editors do handle this differently. They're not supposed to, but they do. Play around with it. Make mistakes, but make sure that when you go on an interview, you know how to do this like the back of your hand. All right, go program, go make some money. See you in the next video.